Hello and welcome back, everyone. Great to have you back here as part of the day. Now, one of the only ways that this conference can be held is our sponsorship, and we have been very fortunate. We have two gold sponsors, and so we have Matt Dragoon, who is our CEO of Ma-10, and he is on screen now. And you'll soon see Fatima Abuchi, who is CEO of AMO, who will be zooming across the side to the left of me. There she is. So thank you both. Matt, thank you so much for everything you do and, basically allowing this event to happen. Your sponsorship is invaluable, and from us, from a community, from the APAC regional leader, thank you. And now I'm going to exit stage right because there's some things that you need to be talking about. So I'm just over here so that Fatima can be on camera.
The magic of I was going to say TV, the magic of our live conference. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining. You and I spoke about what we wanted to cover. There will be a couple of poll questions popping up just for those that are watching now that we're going to use to frame the conversation. So here's the first one. How closely does your PMO work with the change managers in your organisation? And there'll be another one shortly that we will use as a foundation for this talk. Matt and I have been talking all things PMO cross change management, and we've done a number of conversations, and it's been really resonating with people. So I thought, why not? Let's spend the time talking. Also make sure you visit Matt's booth for Ma-10 and request the demo of their platform. It's amazing. We've been working with them for a while, and it's getting rave reviews. So if you do anything today after this, reach out to Matt and his team, and you can do so on LinkedIn as well. So what are we going to talk about today? So let us tell you. So we're going to talk about what to expect when it comes to PMO and change. We're going to talk about why we expect change management to mature in 2026 and why it's so important. How PMOs can elevate their roles by incorporating change management, proven ways that PMOs can adopt to drive sustainable change across teams and functions, and we'll also share some more opportunities for you. Matt, did you want to add anything more about what we're going to cover or anything before we kick off to look at the poll answers?
No, Fatima, I think you've done a really great job at the intro. Just want to say thank you for having me and looking forward to the conversation.
Amazing. Thank you for that. We've just got our next poll popping up on screen now. So it should be popping up. Okay, so I think I'm just going to skip over here. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to look at tech support, the poll questions.
Just leave us with the poll.
So we wanted to cover the answers now. So we've got the first one. Just going to see. Okay, so let me show this first one on stage. Okay, so we just need to find. Okay, so the first question, Matt, we asked was how closely does your PMO work with change managers in your organisation? So PMO and change management in the little capacity, 33%. Our change managers are fully integrated into our PMO, 66%. So 2/3 are saying that they're fully integrated, and 1/3 is not. Does that surprise you?
No, I think it's reflective of the trend that we're seeing more broadly in PMOs, where PMOs are seeking to really drive benefit realization, and they are seeing that change managers play a key role in supporting adoption of new technologies that they're rolling out within the platform, and that's a critical component of benefit realization. So it's great to hear. It's exciting. I think it's a really exciting time for not only PMOs and change managers, but also change managers to see how the relationship between the two disciplines can evolve and how they can add greater value for their organizations.
And then, Matt, one of the other things that we're asking, and we're just getting some more responses coming through, is what will be the biggest driver of change for PMOs in 2026? There's a few responses coming through for that. And I guess maybe that's a really good place for us to start. So I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, what we're seeing in the PMO and change space, and there's the slide on screen reflects some research done by KPMG in the Australian market, that the number one kind of thing that's keeping executive level leaders awake at the moment is how do they get value from their transformation and digital efforts within their business. That's not only an immediate challenge that was identified for this year, but also it's a challenge that's seen as the number one kind of challenge that's faced by organizations moving forward. So, as I mentioned in kind of response to the poll question, one of the key trends that we're seeing when we speak to senior executives, in particular about change management, is they're asking a lot more questions about yes, we're doing digital transformation. Yes, we're implementing new technologies and new solutions, and that's being delivered by the project management office. But how do our businesses operationalize change, and how do we drive a return from that? The other question that I often ask of the CFOs and the CEOs of the world is, what are you doing to ensure or de-risk your benefit realization targets, and how much you're investing in that space? And it's a really interesting conversation because a lot of them draw a bit of a blank kind of look when they get asked that question. And I compare it to if a C-suite was investing in a physical asset, not a digital solution, and just say, $500 million in new plant and equipment rather than $500 million in a technology transformation, they'd typically have insurance policies, they'd have maintenance programs, they would have a number of things that they invest in to ensure that not only they protect that asset, but they extract the value from that asset over time. So the conversations we're seeing and the trends that we're seeing is really that at a board level and also a C-suite level, the C-suite are starting to think about, why don't we have those same type of mechanisms in place to support our digital investments?
And do you think that, this is a never ending challenge that we face, where benefits realization is often stressed at the beginning and then neglected towards the end? And I know that that's why Ma-10 is part of why Ma-10 exists and the platform you've built. But tell us why you think that is, and what is the biggest shift that's needed in order for that bridging of that gap?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest shift that's needed is typically PMOs are really, I guess the way their success is measured is, have we delivered solutions on time and are we delivering on budget, right? And so the PMO is really focused on solution delivery. What we're seeing is an evolution of thinking. And I think to make that successful, the organizations need to adopt a broader view of their PMO success measurement as not only to be, are we delivering on time and on budget, but are the solutions that are being delivered by the PMO actually realizing the value that was documented in the business case?
Absolutely. And it's so interesting because we did some research, before putting this presentation together. And one of the key things that we note is that organizations themselves that do have strong change management practices are 3.5 times more likely to outperform their peers in achieving project success. And then by integrating that change management framework, it actually increases the outcomes significantly. And there's a little graph over here just showing the references and the growth over time and interest over time. Change management itself is something that I feel like from the PMO maybe 5 years ago, change management's maybe in that place where maybe it's not getting the recognition that it deserves and the opportunity that it needs. And I feel like it's becoming a bit more prevalent, but the opportunity for PMOs and change to work together is definitely going to be something that helps shape that. Are you seeing over your sort of career the shift towards greater visibility and awareness of change?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that, and we're seeing that a number of organizations are investing in building their change management capability. So probably one of the biggest trends I've seen in the past maybe 2 to 3 years is that previously organizations would outsource change management with projects. So they'd use their software vendors to come in and do the change management work for them. What we're seeing a lot of now is organizations recognizing the value of building internal capability and really growing a muscle within the organization to be able to do change that is repeatable and scalable, and to be able to measure that over time and measure how effective that they're doing it over time. So I think we're definitely seeing a trend to the value of change management, and we're also seeing a trend to organizations insourcing and looking to build and invest in their own capabilities.
It's very timely you say that, because when we look at recent news this morning that I've seen in the Financial Review around the ANZ CEO talking about removing contractors and consultants, and the comments that I had rated was around insourcing and actually uplifting the capability of the people internally, as opposed to just having heavy dependence on that. So and that was something that came through in some of the conversations earlier today. So let's just sort of shift gears now to some practical deep dive into the PMO project change world. So when we look at this visual for those following along, often when we think about project management, change management, PMO, obviously distinct capabilities, there's definitely overlaps. There's people that can cover all three quite comfortably, and there's some that are more comfortable in one area or the other. But when I think about these three, they're often sort of thought through independently or distinctively, but there is so much uniqueness, but then also parallel. So they're not, they're working together more collaboratively, they get better outcomes. One of the things I like to think about is change management, and Matt and you and I have spoken about this before. I feel like when you think about change management, whether we're talking about large transformations or divisional change, whatever it might be, it's really about the outcomes that are focused outwards. And so I feel like change management itself is about driving adoption, it's about managing stakeholders, it's about preparing the organization and even those that are involved, not in the organization, but indirectly externally, with what's coming. And then when we think about the PMO, talking from a practical lens in my own experience, it's more focused inward. So it's around the governance of projects. It's around maintaining oversight over delivery. It's about bringing together the people that are helping to execute on that change. But ultimately, the challenge we have is project management crosses both change and PMO, ultimately at the heart of it. And so one of the things I talk a lot about, and why we decided to sort of have this conversation in the first place, is the sweet spot is the overlap of change and PMO, where they need to work hand in hand. You've got PMO working into delivery and supporting and driving the messages that's coming from change. And then you've got change that's managing and messaging outwards. And it's the center, the bit there where we align in the middle, that drives better outcomes for projects, particularly when we support each other more effectively. And the two disciplines of change and PMO need to work together more effectively, meet in the middle, and then we can align projects better. So that's just an easy way, I think, of trying to visualize and demonstrate it, in the way I think of change bringing in outputs in, and then PMO managing that into delivery. What's your thoughts, Matt, and what have you seen in practice work?
Yeah, I really like the inward facing versus the outward facing analogy. And I think it's a really simple one to differentiate where the focus and where the value that change management brings and the value that PMO brings. I definitely think there's a significant amount of crossover, especially in the area of stakeholder management. So what I do know about PMOs is most PMOs are the conduit between projects and the C-suite. And I think there's definitely a role for change managers to support the PMO with things like adoption metrics, with things like benefit realization tracking that they're seeing from an operational perspective feeding that to the PMO so that they can engage effectively with data sets to show the executives on how they're tracking towards benefit realization targets. So that's one really good example. The other thing where I think change management is can provide some real value to the PMO is understanding organizational capacity and for change, and being able to feed that into PMO planning. So as the organization, and we hear a lot about change fatigue, but as the organization is absorbing more change, more projects are being deployed, the change managers are in a really unique position where they're hearing the feedback from stakeholder groups, they're able to identify what's happening in the organization, and they're able to feed that back into the PMO to inform the PMO planning. And I think it's going to be more and more as things like AI come on board, and you're seeing more kind of transformational activities happening, that capacity component and that measurement of capacity in the organization is going to be key to helping inform your capacity of the organization to do change.
And Matt, this is a really good segue to this amazing slide, which I love. I've seen this a few times and I don't ever get sick of it. Do you want to take us through this?
Yeah, sure. Look, I'm a little bit of an F1 fan, so I apologise in advance. I'm very excited this year with Oscar Piastri being an Australian, being at the top of the F1. But I look at the change management and the benefit realisation life cycle in the context of an F1 season. So in pre-season in F1, you have everyone involved. You should have change people there. They're doing change analysis work while the solution's being co-designed. You're working in agile, possibly, to develop the solution and release into the business. Then when you get into the practice phase of a Grand Prix season, that's when you're piloting solutions. You're doing what is equivalent to UAT or user acceptance testing. The change managers are working on delivering training and growing or building change readiness. And then the next phase is the qualifying phase of a Grand Prix. So that's where you're not yet competing for points, but you're actually using the fully blown car that you've built. That's racing to get to the starting line and to start as close as possible to give yourself the biggest advantage. So you're working through deployment at that stage. Change managers are heavily involved in go live support, communications, hypercare. The interesting thing about what we do with change is if you think about the change managers as the pit crew who support the business to use the car, we actually send them home when the race is on and when there's points up for grabs. So the people that are there to connect the business to the projects and provide them the support to actually get the most out of the platform, when you start to operationalize the actual solutions that you're delivering, the change management resources disappear. And I think this is the biggest opportunity for change management and PMO moving forward. If we think about what is next best practice or future best practice, it's actually a collaboration in that space that after a project is deployed and after hypercare is delivered, the change managers are still liaising and working with the business to support continued adoption and benefit realization, and they're the conduit back to the PMO so that the PMO can report back to the executive on how the organization is extracting value from the tech that they're invested in. And I think, you know, organizations moving forward are starting to see this gap, and they're starting to look for opportunities to do this in a better way.
It's so interesting because what stands out to me, and as I said, I've seen this a few times and I pick up something new each time. But for those having a look, you can see projects obviously ramps down. But as we talked about early on, projects drop off. They get allocated somewhere else and then they disappear. And so the benefits realization, not only do you need to have that process, but the change embedment that you always talk about the change itself and PMO are both in line and continue through. So you've got the governance of that change and making sure that those benefits can be realised. So I think that's a really good example and very timely with the Grand Prix not far away.
Yeah.
So
Fatima,
that's
just one other thing there is in working with the clients that we work with, we don't see it needing to be a high level of change management effort. And it can be done in, an iterative or agile manner where you're measuring leading indicators, you're doing that on a quarterly basis, you're actually resetting expectations with the organization every quarter after a major go live event, and then you're able to report on that back to the executive. So I just wanted to clarify, we're not, I'm definitely not advocating that you need full-time dedicated resources to continue on, but it's about, to your point, that your change resources and your PMO are constant supporting the business. So how do you get the most value out of them to drive the benefits from your projects?
Absolutely. And from a PMO perspective, it might be that you ramp down the level of support you need from your resources and they start supporting us, but you've got that continuation. So I think there's lots of ways of doing that for sure. So let's sort of round out talking about how we expect change management, or why we expect change management to mature. So maybe you kick us off, and then I'll wrap up with some PMO, and then we'll share some more ideas as well.
Yeah, so we've touched on that, this drive for greater visibility and greater transparency and greater realization of benefits. So that's the key one that we're seeing is driving the demand for and the interest from the C-suite in change management. When we talk about visibility, I think what I see there is that's going to drive a greater level of accountability for change teams. As it's an interesting dynamic where, as organizations and C-suite leaders are saying, why aren't we reaching our benefit realization targets? That immediately switches to what's the value, or how well has change been managed in the organization, what's worked and what hasn't. So I think that continual learning and evolving and developing scalable and repeatable practices for internal capability is going to be really, really important. One of the other things that we're seeing as a trend, and this is probably an early trend in the market, is that organizations recognize that they can't move away from consultants 100%, because the reality is they need consultants to flex their workforce up and down in the change space. But what we're seeing the leading organizations doing is they're developing their internal capability and process, and rather saying to the Deloitte of the world, come in and bring it, your methodology and your tools, they're saying, we will hire you, but you need to use our methodology, our tools, because those are the things that our people are comfortable with. They know the language, they understand how they work. It makes it easier for them to absorb the change and the activities. So we're seeing that as a significant kind of upside, or a significant shift in that growth in capability. And then as with everything else, technology and AI are really are talked about a lot in the space, and are really driving the delivery in the space moving forward. So they're probably the key things that we're seeing.
And I would add, just in terms of one of the key themes that we've been hearing throughout today's sessions has been adaptiveness and adaptation. And I spend a lot of time talking about adaptive governance, and I could spend hours talking about that. We could probably fill the whole conference, to be honest, but we don't have time for that now. But I do emphasize what you say around executives and organizations wanting to build that capability internally. I agree. They need to make sure that they have frameworks and approaches to doing that in a way that's not only starts them off on the right foot, but then is sustainable as well. And there's another conversation around how you sustain that change as well. And so I think that that's really important. And ultimately, I feel like the PMO is the conduit to projects, the conduit to change, the conduit to a lot of areas of an organization, which is something that resonated from some of the earlier talks as well. So definitely think it can mature, definitely think it's maturing, and some great work that people like yourself are doing to help this cause as well.
Yeah, and I think on that, we've seen some really great examples of, PMO leaders and transformation directors getting involved to champion the change management cause. And change management in most organizations, if I'm being really frank, doesn't hold a lot of weight because it's not a dedicated department. It often struggles to get a seat at the table. So I think where we've seen some really good collaboration is where head of PMO or head of transformation is actually advocating on behalf of the change managers and the change discipline about where they can play in the organization, how they can add value, and how they can work together collaboratively, and that's seeing a significant shift as well.
It's actually really relevant because that's part of the reason why you and I connected at the beginning, because change management and PMO working together can drive greater outcomes. And so I agree fully that the change management, I mean, in a lot of organizations, at least the ones I've been in, there's been many, but they don't have that. And I think there it's changing, similar to PMO, not having a seat at the executive table and all of that. So I think working together, you've got projects, PMO and change. You get PMO and change together, you drive better outcomes for the projects themselves. You then get project managers and directors advocating for you, and it ends up, ending very well. So let's close out with some suggestions or ideas on how we can see PMOs elevating their roles. I'm going to quickly touch on one, and then I think we circle back to how Ma-10 is actually helping to drive that. So from a PMO perspective, a couple of things. We're doing a lot on capability development and spending time internally in organizations to uplift operational teams so that they can better work with consultants, contractors, and project people. And we're doing that in ways such as the introduction of micro projects, which is small, adaptive, incremental change. I won't go into too much more. Happy to talk to anyone offline. But Matt, tell us a little bit more about how Ma-10 is helping to drive change readiness, measuring that change, and really where can people find more information about you to learn more and maybe get a demo?
Yeah, sure, Fatima. So I think there's a couple of things that Ma-10 will do and support, and also that I think are really important. So we talk about repeatable and scalable change management processes. So with those, you can also drive consistent measurement of change management outcomes, measuring things like adoption, readiness, business impact, capacity for change. If all of your projects are taking the same approach, that measurement then becomes consistent. And then I think, where I see immediate opportunities is where the PMO has responsibility to report to the executive on the progress of the PMO, is about how do you actually, how do you incorporate the change management measurement into your PMO measurement and present it as a single dashboard? Because that then provides real value to your execs on at a practical level. This is what our people are experiencing, and this is how we're delivering our projects, and the value of that data coming together is really significant. So I mean, in terms of what we do, we have our technology platform that helps organizations do that and really bring together a consistent change approach, and also support the benefit realization tracking of leading and lagging indicators. And we can also offer, and I do this collaboratively with Fatima, we can offer to support you in a consulting capacity on how to mature your change and PMO collaboration, and how to develop your reporting frameworks that bring in change management information, PMO information, so you can continue to evolve your PMO using and collaborating with change effectively.
Amazing. Thank you, Matt. I think I recommend everyone check out Ma-10.io. I've looked at it. I've obviously been involved in it for a while now together. Highly recommend it. As Matt said, more than happy to speak to you afterwards. If you want to learn more about it, reach out to Matt or myself. Visit Matt and his team at the Ma-10 booth, and make sure you message him on LinkedIn. Happily harass him with messages of how well he's done, because he's an expert on all things change, one of the best. So thank you, Matt, for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks so much, Fatima, and thank you so much for having me, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Sounds good. To see you in the next session. Bye.
Bye.